Hello and welcome to Allegedly Astrology. Each week we break down the astrology that happened during some of the biggest scandals and events in history.
Thanks for listening, and if you guys want to support us even more, you can subscribe to our Patreon. For $5 a month, you get at least 2 extra episodes.
You could also leave us a 5-star review and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you listen on.
And if you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and DM us a screenshot of that review, we'll make you a custom meme of your big three and send you a quick write-up about it.
We also have cool Allegedly Astrology stuff on TeePublic, so go there to check it out.
And make sure to follow us on social media. We're Allegedly Astrology on Instagram, Reddit, and TikTok, and Allegedly Astro on Twitter.
And you can visit our website, allegedlyastrology.com, to learn more about us and the show, or book a reading with me, Dana, and check out charts and transcripts for select episodes.
So, Dana, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about Armie Hammer and his family.
And this episode comes with a trigger warning. If you know anything about the Armie Hammer investigations, we're going to be talking about emotional, physical, and sexual abuse dealing with Armie and his family. So, in case you don't know, Armie Hammer was once an up-and-coming Hollywood golden boy, made famous for roles in The Social Network, where he played the Winklevoss twins, right?
Yeah.
And then Call Me By Your Name. He seemingly had a picture-perfect marriage and family life, but that all came crashing down when allegations of sexual misconduct and casual cannibalism surfaced from multiple women claiming to have had relationships with him. So let's take a look at his story and his astrology.
So allegedly, Armie Hammer never really liked talking about his family or his family's history, so he would probably hate this episode if he knew it existed. But he's the grandson of a huge oil tycoon named Armie Hammer and was named after him. So Armie, he's like literally like a legacy name. And so he comes from a lot of money and power. His family, very wealthy, very privileged. He was born in California, and then his family moved to the Cayman Islands, like honestly for like a tax situation. And then when he moved back to California, he decided he wanted to be an actor. So what's his big three, Dana? Because I am intrigued.
Well, we also have to note that his family money, like Sarah mentioned, comes from oil and not the company Arm and Hammer.
That's what I thought it was.
A lot of people think that it is, but no, they're just your standard run-of-the-mill oil tycoons.
Casual oil.
So, a fourth generational casual owner birth chart. He's born on August 28th, 1986 at 1:16 a.m. in Los Angeles. He has a Virgo sun and a Gemini moon and rising. He also has Mercury in Leo, Venus in domicile in Libra, Mars exalted in Capricorn, Jupiter in domicile in Pisces, and Saturn in Sagittarius. So the overview of his chart, his big three are all ruled by Mercury, and his Mercury is in Leo in the 3rd house. And so Mercury in Leo acts as a filter for like his entire self-conception, right? The sun is like identity, the rising is personality, and the moon is like your mind, your emotions, your body. So this is fitting for an actor since Leo's a performer. Although honestly, I feel like he's not a very good one, but he's not a bad one either. I can't really even remember him acting. Anyway, so he like probably wants to be the star of every room, and maybe has like a compulsion to perceive validation from everyone in the room. And this can perhaps infect his like ability to perceive people as separate from him, which is a light way of saying this could be, this is like narcissism maybe. I mean, he obviously has something wrong with him. But yeah, he also may like lack the ability to be objective at times, needing his, point of view validated, which is common in Leo placements. And so once you know that, you can just live with it, which is what I do as a Leo rising. So that's his Mercury, which is like really driving the ship. And again, that rules his Virgo sun, which is particular, analytical, detail-oriented, and a control freak. And Virgo is also the sign of the Virgin. So his sun's in the 4th house of parents and roots, and it's square Saturn, which is the planet of tradition, and his Saturn's in Sagittarius in his 7th house. So his identity revolves around his lineage, which makes sense since he's like a 4th generation billionaire. And he might feel an inherent responsibility to like serve his family and his marriage, which is perverted by having Uranus in Sagittarius as well in his 7th house. And he has...
I feel like that makes a lot of sense. Like when we learn about his wife and his family, like this definitely is tracking.
His Leo Mercury also rules that Gemini moon and rising. So I'm just going to brace all the Geminis out there. This is not a good PR episode for us, but it's fine. We will
prevail.
We will fail.
You shall overcome.
We shall overcome.
I will endure. Yeah.
And so the moon is in his first house. The moon in the first house struggles with objectivity too, because the first house is personality and the moon is feeling. So your point of view, your perception is sort of modulated through emotion. It can also mean that you change your ideas a lot, which can make him really interesting. The moon in Gemini is also inclined to intellectualize emotion rather than like process it. So with that, all those emotions, the unprocessed emotions, could like color his perspective. But Gemini's fun, quick-witted and changeable. So also they're chameleons. His personality can be modulated by his environment with his ruler in the third house of immediate environment. I feel like he's just really charming, but also extremely hard to know. You could have like a good time with him and then be like, I don't know who that guy is at all. And then he also has Venus in domicile in Libra in its joy. So his Venus is very strong, and Venus is money. It's also being popular. It's also being able to have fun. And that's why it's all enjoying the fifth house. Those are all fifth house topics. And Venus in Libra is also inclined to have peaceful relationships, whereas Venus in Taurus makes sure it's peaceful, first, and then secures a relationship. Venus in Libra wants to reach across the aisle. But his Venus in Libra squares his Mars, which is exalted in Capricorn in his natal 8th house, which is interesting because the 8th house is the second house from the 7th house. And the second house of any house is the food. Second house is eating. So I feel like that's kind of cannibalism. But yeah, so this is about secrets and taboo. It's also maybe expressing his creativity through psychological taboo channels, which is, maybe if I were him, and I'm not him, I would argue that actually all of those texts were just me doing art. I was just doing performance art. So I'm sorry that it offended everyone, but I was exploring something new. Yeah. Also, Venus in his 5th house rules his 12th house. So the 12th house is the house of hidden enemies, which means that his hidden enemies are going to be dates and hookups.
Interesting.
Uranus also stationed direct 11 hours before he was born. So Uranus is still in his chart. So that's going to color that's why there's so much deviation from a norm within him, even though he feels this need to uphold tradition. He also is a fucking weirdo.
His chart, I feel it really foreshadows a lot of the stuff we're talking about, Virgo, just being such a control freak. Also, something I was thinking about, Mars in Capricorn, obviously it's a nice placement, but when I see it in the 8th house, I wonder that to me does feel very dom in a way,
inherited dominance maybe too.
Yeah. And then also too, Venus on his south node, I feel he inherently is good at being fun. He's mastered the art of being charming and being fun to people. I'm sure when you're around him, he's you're oh my God, you are so fun. You're so cute, blah, blah, blah. But the one question I do have is I feel normally the moon in the first house, people that have that, it's very easy to tell when they're mad or sad. They really wear everything on their sleeve. But because it's in Gemini, I wonder if it's the same.
I feel you would have to know him. Maybe his wife does, because on the Patreon episode where we do their charts, you can see how she kind of knows him in a way that maybe other people don't. But yeah, having I would be surprised if he's an outwardly emotional person.
Well, Armie went to acting classes and he ended up picking up small roles on shows like Arrested Development, Veronica Mars, Reaper, Desperate Housewives, and Gossip Girl. But his big break came when he appeared as the Winklevoss twins in The Social Network.
My God, literally, my dad only drank apple martinis for quite a while after seeing that movie.
Wow. Who drinks apple martinis in those?
It's Justin Timberlake's character, I'm pretty sure. They're at a club and he orders apple martinis, and there honestly was months where that's all my dad was.
I love that influenced him. He's that's what I'm going to do. Your dad's a Gemini, right? So there's some good PR. Also, yeah. Wait, what's Justin Timberlake's line in the movie? What $1 million isn't cool. What's cool? $1 billion? Is that it?
I don't remember, but I just knew he was the Napster guy.
R.I.P. a Napster.
So after The Social Network, he got a lot of parts where he played the handsome dude role. Unfortunately, though he was in movies with a lot of big name stars, the movies he selected ended up being just bombing in theaters. So they were all giant flops.
That's probably why you don't really have an opinion on his acting, Dana, because you've probably really never seen most of his movies, because most of them were pretty bad and got really bad reviews.
Yeah, I can't think of a single.
But his turning point was when he was in the movie Call Me By Your Name. And this movie revived his career, and there were talks of him being nominated for an Oscar. Thankfully, that never ended up happening. And I think we can all, say it was Timothée Chalamet and the dad in that movie that really stole the show. But he did get a lot of critical acclaim for the role. And he kind of went around acting like I am the perfect movie star. But around this time, the rumors started that he was into BDSM.
But the rumors were kind of overlooked because, he was in this very cute, picture-perfect marriage with his wife, Elizabeth Chambers. They had 2 kids. She's so pretty. Everything seemed great, but eventually they did get a divorce.
And they played it off like most celebs, where they did a joint Instagram post. It looked like an amicable split. And, they led people to assume that they got divorced because they got married super young. They were married for 10 years and together for 13. So a lot of people were like, oh, this is like a midlife crisis sort of thing, or like any celebrity relationship.
But about 6 months after the divorce announcement, an anonymous woman known as House of Effie came forward on Instagram and claimed to have had a 4-year-long affair with Armie, where she says she was abused emotionally, mentally, and sexually. And she even went on to publish graphic and violent texts and DMs about that he was sending her about cannibalism and rape fantasies, and saying he wanted to drink her blood. So it was pretty aggressive. It's crazy,
like Twilight. His
I know.
porn search is probably like Twilight, but Edward and Bella.
But it's so weird to me, that he just did it under his normal Instagram name, what was why?
That's what's so crazy to me about all this is he just did it so brazenly and in a way that if you're a celebrity, and also he's not just any run of the mill celebrity. He comes from a super rich family, which, we've discussed. And so he should have some sense of protecting his privacy. And especially if you're a married man with children, the brazenness of it all, I think is what was really, really shocking to me. Because it's if he's willing to say that stuff to them and imagine what he does in private.
Regardless, what was going on when the allegations came out?
So this was January 12th, 2021, and the sun was in Aquarius along with Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn, and they are all squaring the moon in Taurus, conjunct Uranus and Mars. So the moon is exalted in Taurus, but this one's majorly corrupt by being conjunct Mars and Uranus. Mars is in detriment in Taurus, and it's averse to conflict, and Uranus is a planet of disruption. But Mars in Taurus chooses conflict, so this one was chosen. It's just generally a major shakeup and surprises that induce discomfort and something you really don't expect. And the moon in Taurus squares the sun in Aquarius, so it's a first quarter moon. This one's connected to Taurus, the Taurus new moon that happened in April 2020. So I don't know if maybe that was around the time they were doing divorce proceedings or whatever, or it could have been a significant turning point in his affair with House of Effie. The sun's also in detriment in Aquarius because the sun is the king and Aquarius is the sign of the populace. So this placement can be about knocking people down a few pegs. It's conjunct its ruler Saturn, which can enhance those punitive qualities. And Saturn's not just punishment, it's also consequences. So I'm not trying to say that he was unfairly punished by any means. And Saturn in Aquarius is squared the moon in Taurus. So that's a reduction of resources or access or image, and it impacted his career and his earning potential. And then Jupiter is also in Aquarius, and Jupiter is abundance and favor, so that can maximize punishment, especially with Mercury there. Mercury spreads the word. And then looking at this with his chart, he was in an 11th house year. Aries is his perfected sign. Mars is his time lord. And the 11th house is audience. Aries is new beginnings. Mars is aggression. So the moon in Taurus in his 12th house is the house of hidden enemies. So this makes me feel like he was totally blindsided and probably felt betrayed. The nodes were in his 1st and 7th houses. And so whenever the nodes are transiting your 1st and 7th, major changes occur in relationships. The South node in the 7th, that is his tanking relationships and getting divorced. It's also conjunct his natal Uranus. So he was already getting divorced, right? And he had settled that. But now there's this major plot twist of another relationship surprise. And the North Node in his first house is kind of exposing his personality in a way that people had not been seen before. And on his moon, the North Node rules his second, or his moon rules his second. So the North Node on his moon impacts his livelihood going forward. So he lost jobs. And his Chiron, which means that he was getting his ass handed to him. And finally, his progressed moon is in Virgo, which is conjunct his natal IC. And the progressed moon's the focal point in your progressed chart. So in Virgo, it's receiving criticism, and it's in his fourth house of family and hidden things. So it's going all the way to his roots. It's conjunct his IC, which is a point of endings. And so I feel a lot of endings converged for him at this time, both his marriage and his career. Just the two things that you need to be saying, I guess.
Not just his career, his reputation.
Yeah. That's 10th house. Good. That's the difference between the 10th house and anything else.
Yep.
Or the midheaven, I should say.
I mean, obviously, yeah, I feel the North Node on his Chiron is. And also, too, just because it's in Gemini, the fact that the things that were exposed were things he had written down.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
It was
too.
all his communication that exposed him.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Venus on his Mars, and Mars was his Time Lord, and Venus rules his 12th house. So it's in his 8th house, so he can't control. The 8th house is where you can't control stuff. And then ruling his 12th house, all these secrets come out. And Neptune's conjunct his Jupiter, which is his legacy, is, like Elise just said, his reputation. And so Jupiter is in Pisces. It rules his 10th and his 7th. So he has no idea what's going to happen to either.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So Effie says that after she released her allegations, more women approached her with their own affair stories with Armie, and it became clear that he had a pattern of things like love bombing and oversharing to create a sense of intimacy with his partners, and then he would start to try to control them.
So again, that Virgo sun. One of the other women that came forward was Courtney. I cannot pronounce her last name, but it starts with a V. And she's an app developer and social media influencer living in Dallas, Texas. And they dated for several months. And she even met his mom, she said.
And she went on the record with Dumois, which is crazy that we're saying that about Dumois, it's a, publication, but it is now. But she even told Page Six that Armie subjected her to emotional abuse, sexually coerced her, and made her feel unsafe.
So we're going to look at Armie and Courtney's bi-will here, but on the Patreon, we're going to compare his bi-will with Courtney with his bi-will with his wife, Elizabeth, because this isn't the exact quote, and I couldn't find it, but at one point in an interview, he was kind of talking about his kinks, and he said he would never submit his wife to certain fantasies of his because he cares about her and respects her too much. Which is
that is so fucked up. Oh my God, I'm so angry. That's so annoying. What is psycho? Why would you saying that into
you respect your wife too much, but you don't respect women?
I actually hate women, but I respect this one.
Right. So we're going to be checking that out on the Patreon. But until then, let's look at his bi-will with Courtney.
Courtney was born May 22nd, 1990 in Dallas, Texas. We don't know what time, but she has a Gemini sun and a Taurus moon. So her Venus is conjunct his North Node in Aries in his 11th house. And so maybe they were introduced by friends. I don't know how they met. There's intense magnetism here. The North Node is something that you want to explore, something that maybe feels unfamiliar. And also Venus in Aries is, what's the word? It goes after what it's Venus is, the planet of magnetism. It's willing things your way. It's, your feminine wiles or just your wiles. But there's an aggression and sort of a hunger with Venus in Aries that can be really exciting. And her Mars is conjunct his Jupiter in Pisces in the 10th house. And so Mars's sex and Jupiter is abundance and favor. And this aspect would have enhanced their attraction to each other. But Mars is also war, and the 10th house is career, reputation, and publicity. And so his Jupiter is also in his 10th house, which rules his Sagittarius 7th house. So this, her being in his 10th house, she dominated his life and his marriage, right? His legacy, I guess. Her Neptune is conjunct his Mars in Capricorn in the 8th house. And this is a tight conjunction. So, because a lot of millennials have Neptune in Capricorn, but theirs is 1 degree away. And so Neptune's fantasy and deception, Mars' aggression and energy. So this is, and the 8th house is taboo. So he does feel despite that, really perverted and, like sexually or self-unaware comment. Like he can, this is a good sort of aspect to have with people who you want to explore kinks with, I would say. And her moon and Mercury are in Taurus in his 12th house of secrets and hidden enemies. And she, exposed him then on her lunar return with Uranus and Mars on her Mercury. So maybe even she surprised herself. Maybe she had been thinking about it for a while and then was triggered by this sort of, triple conjunction of planets. And so her moon and Mercury in Taurus are opposite his Pluto and Scorpio. So the moon opposite Pluto in synastry can indicate jealousy and power games in a relationship. It can also be like, intense. And so this likelihood is even greater with the moon in Taurus because it's inclined to possessiveness. And so opposite Pluto and Scorpio, which is inclined to keeping secrets like as collateral. And 12th house synastry is tough because it can indicate like both transcendent relationships if two people are sort of committed to growth. Otherwise, it's like can for sure breed resentment. Her son's in his first house. And this is another, like, this is sort of like seals the deal in a lot of ways, I think, because he's very mercurial, but his Mercury's like in Leo. So she has like an affinity and understanding. She probably made him feel like a star and he loved it, like maybe she understood this at a certain point. And then I don't know, but she has her Gemini sun squares his Virgo sun. So they're both Mercury ruled. They could probably talk all night. Maybe he felt like she was, maybe he's like settling father issues with her because he also comes from a long line of Gemini and Virgo men. So who knows?
I also think with the 12th house synastry too, the 12th house is a lot of things, but sometimes people say like if you have 12th house synastry, it means like it was an affair, because it's like hidden secret thing. And
the 5th house is also related to affairs, and his Venus rules his 12th house and his 5th house.
Oh. But like that Mars and Neptune conjunction, like, yeah, obviously, like it's also interesting too with the North Node Venus synastry, just because like, the North Node, a lot of times when someone's planets hit it, it like feels like faded, or a lot of times like the person may, teach you something like a lesson. It's kind of like karmic. So because her Venus is in his 11th house, I do think it's pretty telling because like just the house of audiences, like them meeting together basically altered the whole course of his life.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, they met at a bar. I think they were both out with friends that night. So interesting that you said that, Dana, that you didn't just assume they met on Raya or that he slid into the DMs. But anyway, back to Armie. After the scandal hits, he gets dropped from all of his movies, dropped from his management agency, dropped from more movies and a Broadway play. And the Los Angeles Police Department begins an investigation into Armie over an alleged sexual assault. We didn't know what it was at the time. And as a result, Armie checked himself into a rehab facility for drug, alcohol, and sex issues, but he says all of his interactions with the women were consensual.
And with all the talk of Armie going on, TikTok was like hot on the trail. So they started sleuthing and realized that Armie was not the first member of the Hammer family to have some scandals. In fact, a book that was written by Armie's aunt, Casey Hammer, detailed how the men in the family were all just like toxic assholes.
Love the TikTok sleuthers. They just go where no one's gone before, and I love it.
And the best investigative reporters are like 13-year-olds on TikTok.
Literally, I would trust them with anything. But the Hammer family got away with a lot of messed up things, and it was because of their power and privilege. And Vanity Fair even wrote a whole feature on the family titled The Fall of the House of Hammer that revealed that Armie's story is just one in a long history of family dysfunction. And the tea on the Hammers kept spilling when Discovery Plus released a 3-part docuseries called The House of Hammer that talked about Armie's relationships and the Hammer family dynasty.
Yeah, I watched it. It's insane. That's honestly, we're doing this episode because Elise watched it a while ago and was like, I was like
live texting them, like, did you know that he did this? And then it just like each episode, more shit came out about their family. I'm like, oh my God, he did this. He did, like, it just was honestly nuts.
It is. Definitely watch it if you haven't. But the series interviews two of Armie's former girlfriends, Courtney and Julia, and some of his members, like his Aunt Casey, who honestly seems cool. Like, she got out.
Yeah,
you know?
Really glad for her. Not everyone was happy with the docuseries. Effie, who was the first woman to bring the allegations of Armie Hammer to light, feels like the doc exploited her and her trauma. You know, I guess she wasn't interviewed in the docuseries. I don't know if that was by choice or whatever, but the creators of the series said that they didn't interview Effie because they didn't want to get involved with an active investigation. And they said that they included Effie's screenshots and videos because it's an important part of the story and to the timeline of events. So she wasn't interviewed, but they used her messages and screenshots in the documentary. And that was sort of without her approval, was part of her statement that she made.
So this docuseries really exposed not just Armie, but the whole Hammer family like never before. So Dana, what was going on when House of Hammer premiered?
This was September 2nd, 2022, and the sun was in Virgo and the moon was in Scorpio. So the moon in Scorpio squares Venus in Leo and Saturn in Aquarius. And moon square Venus is conflicting. It's conflicting views of the feminine. This is like classic Madonna horror complexes. So that's what it's about. I'm assuming. I haven't seen it, but it's for sure in the mix. It can also be about like jealousy and discord in relationships. And the moon in Scorpio withholds validation from Venus in Leo. And then the moon in Scorpio square Saturn in Aquarius. I feel like that's ritual sacrifice. And also,
Whoa.
You know, like, I mean, that's sort of like what celebrity is in general. Also, Mercury is in Libra opposite Jupiter and Aries. So this is like hot gossip about relationships and like talking a lot. The sun is in Virgo, square Mars and Gemini. This is like sort of ups all the like talking about, you know, just like gossip and discourse. So it's, and also like chaos and something like competitive could come in the mix. Venus is in Leo, opposite Saturn in Aquarius, and this can make someone or something like hard to love and just like sort of lack sympathy. There's like a love drought of sorts. And on this day, Venus was exactly conjunct Armie's Mercury. And so Armie turned 36 a few days earlier, and he started a first house Mercury year. So transits to his Mercury are especially significant. And this year changes like him in general. The first house is you. It's like everything about your life and how you see the world, and also how other people will see you. And Venus rules his 5th house of libido and 12th house of secrets, both of which were exposed in this documentary. So, and also the sun is exactly conjunct his IC, so this is illuminating hidden things. The 4th house is the house of hidden things, and your roots and who we are when we're alone with ourselves and like your family. This is like extremely indicative of all of these things coming to light.
Yeah, it's like so literal.
Yeah. Also, February 2022, so just a few months afterward, he had a progressed solar eclipse in Libra. And so we all have progressed new moons and full moons, but we don't all have progressed eclipses. And so it's interesting when that happens. So this is in his 5th house, indicating major plot twists about his like love life and like what he does to have fun, recreation, and also creativity. So his creativity was limited by this, I'm assuming. But yeah, it's a lot going on.
No, it is. The astrology for this is very literal. So now we're going to get into the Armie Hammer family, and go through some of the men. So we're going to start with Armand Hammer. So this is Armie's great grandfather. He was one of the wealthiest men in the world, and he was worth around 180 million when he died. He was very powerful. Like it was said, politicians were in his back pocket. Like if you watch House of Hammer, John F. Kennedy called him, he was meeting with Russian presidents at the Kremlin, he was welcome there during a time Americans weren't allowed in Russia.
His father, Julius Hammer, so that would be Armie's great, was known as Lenin's chosen capitalist.
Oh my God. Which is insane.
They were just
right? Yeah. Let's start making merch of that. But the thing about Armand was that he wanted his family name to be pristine. Allegedly, he controlled the family. He would spy on them. He would tap their phones and listen, which is crazy. He also had 3 wives, and one of his wives said he was a master at psychological manipulation. He had a ton of affairs, and one of his mistress, he tapped her phone and controlled her and wouldn't let her see other guys. So sounds like he was a bit much.
Yeah, and this is a time when it's not like you were just like casually reading someone's text messages. The having to like tap phones is like extra difficult and therefore scary. But he was also exposed for having many grifts. He was engaged in things like laundering money, using artwork to fund Soviet espionage. He bribed his way into the oil business. He even knocked off those weird Fabergé eggs. So, like, besides being like, you know, bad guy to women, he was just real shady in business. Basically, he was literally like a Russian spy. So, Dana, what is Armin's chart like? Gotta know.
He was born May 21st, 1898 at 10 a.m. in New York. And he is a Gemini sun and moon and a Leo rising.
Whoa.
His rising is a
boom, 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 boom.
Okay, so my rising and his are at the same degree, along with Johnny Depp and Jake Gyllenhaal. So cool for us.
All men that have been semi-disgraced via relationships. Let me just put it that way. So hopefully that doesn't happen to you, Dana.
I mean, let's hope. And his Mercury's in Taurus, his Venus is in Gemini, his Mars is in Aries, his Jupiter's in Libra, and his Saturn's in Sagittarius. So he has this cool Gemini stellium in his 11th house, including the Sun, Moon, Venus, Neptune, and Pluto. So Neptune and Pluto aren't exactly conjunct in his chart. So there was like I don't know how many decades, but for a few decades, they were both in Gemini. And the exact conjunction happens every 492 years. So this is like a major turning point. We also did an episode on the Sackler family. And this was around the time I think that like opioids were invented or something, or Purdue Pharma might have been founded around that time. Anyway, this is just important. But yeah, so he's very mercurial, just like his great-grandson, Armie. But his chart ruler is the sun in Gemini, which makes him ruled by his Gemini sun as opposed to his like Mercury. His Gemini and sun and moon are conjunct. He was born on a new moon, which means the moon is not visible in the sky. So I feel like that's hidden emotions. And you can also like maybe hide your intentions. But his moon is conjunct Pluto. So this is intensely like being perverted, really wanting to know other people's secrets, tapping phones. I'm very Gemini and I will find information out about people just because like someone asked me because I'm bored. Like I like to just find stuff out. So the fact that he did all this, I honestly am like, oh, that does sound interesting, but not to violate
and
privacy.
Like he had politicians in his back pocket. How do you think he did that? By finding secrets out about them and then basically blackmailing them. Like he was like a master of blackmail, and that's like a tactic that he would like pass down in his family.
Cool legacy.
Cool.
So yeah, and his Venus is conjunct Neptune, and so this indicates like delusions of grandeur. Also, I guess being really creative in how you procure information, really going hard for it. And so this insane Gemini stellium is ruled by Mercury in Taurus, conjunct his midheaven, and Taurus is a sign of wealth. The midheaven is legacy and career. You know, he wanted to be rich and famous and comfortable. And Mercury in Taurus is also like, it ups the hedonism of his Gemini stellium. So this is like self-serving chaos. He also has Jupiter in Libra trine his sun in Gemini. So this makes him like popular. This is how he curries favor with people. Jupiter is favors and people liking you. And so Jupiter in Libra trine the sun in Gemini is very like, I'm not surprised that people were like, you know, maybe people started telling him his secrets, or people started telling them their secrets, and then he was like intoxicated by it and then figured out how to get it on his own.
Yeah, interesting. Well, next up, we have his son, Julian, which is Armie's grandfather. And we've known from Casey that he was a really wild character. He always had tons of loaded guns in the house. He was always drunk. He was really abusive to his wife.
And his wife couldn't leave because Armin would say that he would like destroy her life and like completely ruin her. But eventually, like the mom did leave. Like this is Casey and Michael's mom, which Michael's Armie's dad. And that's what he did. He like ruined her life. Like she got like no money. And Casey, his aunt, like Armie's aunt, went to stay with his mom, and Michael, his Armie's dad, went to stay with his dad. And their mom says that like she regrets letting Michael choose to stay with Armand because he was like fucking crazy.
Julian, yeah. Michael.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
But yeah, and you know, I think she, you know, as a mother, you know, usually you can get custody, but I just don't think she was willing to battle the Hammer family and risk losing Casey as well. So, but yeah, Julian was eventually arrested for murder. He straight up killed his friend over a gambling debt. Like, this isn't like speculation. It's just proven. Like, he shot his friend. It's just like, it's a fact. And Armand, Julian's father, paid off a judge, and the charges were eventually dropped. And, you know, to just kill someone in cold blood as a full-blown adult man and just walk away unscathed is crazy to me. But there were also darker claims that Julian may have sexually abused his daughter, Casey.
Ew.
I know. Sad.
But going back to, you know, now that I think about it, maybe like how brazen Armie was in those texts, maybe those texts in like DMs, it's probably because like, look at, like, it's like his grandfather was able to like straight up kill someone and be like, yeah, I killed this guy, and it go away. So, I mean, you know, like, what's a screenshot, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like, one of his grandparents, like, I mean, this episode is going to be long, but, you know, we cut some things out, but like, his grandfather was involved in the Watergate cover-up.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and then he got George Bush Senior to like pardon him. Needing a presidential pardon like is crazy, and like having that celebrated in the family. Like, Casey said that like these things would be like laughed off about. Like, oh yeah, my grandpa killed someone in cold blood, haha. Like, just like all of this was sort of jokingly said, and like, so I can't imagine like what Armie grew up around.
Also, I just had a Gemini flash of insight. I know he used his real name to DM people because he wanted to, like, if you're love bombing someone, you don't want them to think that you're using some sort of untrustworthy handle. You know, you don't want to feel like, he doesn't want them to feel like a secret. He probably was like, you know, like, this isn't a secret. You know.
Yeah, that was part of his love bombing, is that like he would share like really intimate details about himself, and they couldn't believe that he was like willing to be so quote unquote vulnerable about his like personal life.
He's an idiot.
So Dana strikes again, that Gemini insight.
Also, that might be that Moon and Gemini in the first again. Like, you're just like talking emotions, like crazy, like revealing crazy shit about yourself, but it's like just words to you, you know?
I do know, Sarah.
I do know. I don't know because I'm a Cancer Moon, so I only feel everything. So next we're going to move on to Michael, who's Armie's father, and this is also his aunt Casey's brother. So Michael was left the whole business empire. Like, big Armand just skipped over Julian and was like, you know, fuck that guy. My grandson will have this money. So Michael was just like in charge of this huge business, and he was really into excess. He drank a lot. He did a lot of drugs. He also was said to have used the company as his own personal piggy bank, but he never went to jail for it because he just settled out of court. So, you know, casual. So, Dana, what's Michael's big three?
Michael was born on September 8th, 1955 at 5:10 p.m. in Los Angeles, California, and he has a Virgo sun, a moon in Gemini, and an Aquarius rising. He also has Mercury in Libra, Venus and Mars in Virgo, and Jupiter in Leo, Saturn in Scorpio. So he's the same sun and moon as Armie. Cool. And his Pluto is in Leo, which is exactly conjunct Armie's Mercury in Leo, which rules Armie's, you know, sun, moon, and rising. So I feel like that just sort of shows like inheriting, I guess it's not generational trauma, generational perversion.
Yeah.
And he has this Virgo stellium in the 8th house, which is inheriting money, identity, drive, neuroses, and being secret. The 8th house is taboo. Virgo is all about purity. And there's like, he has his Venus in Virgo, which is in fall. So I feel like with his Venus in Virgo in the 8th house, along with his sun and Mars. So the 8th house is like where other people can sort of have control in your life, along with the 12th and the 6th. And I feel like this is him sort of both inheriting like these proclivities, inheriting a lot of money, but also Venus in Virgo usually feels like it has to earn love. I feel like he made other people feel like they had to earn his love. Is probably what went on there. And so he's an Aquarius rising. Aquarius risings can often like feel destined for something great or greater than they, you know, came in with. maybe like they want to make a name for themselves. And his rising is ruled by Saturn and Scorpio in the 10th house, which makes him like both Logan Roy and Kendall. And honestly, I didn't read it before, so that is interesting because like, he did inherit everything. He's just like, he wants him. I feel like he probably is someone who feels power by making other people feel fear. And maybe he felt afraid of his dad, which would make sense because his dad sounds terrifying and also murdered someone. And then he so inherited like that sort of desire to make other people feel uncomfortable around him. But also he wanted to feel he probably wanted people to like respect him. Also having Saturn in the 10th can indicate that. And so his moon in Gemini is trine its ruler Mercury in Libra. So just like his grandpa, he has a Gemini Libra trine, which makes him, it can make other people like him. Like this can also be inclined to infidelity, but this is the chart of a liar, is when I said it. If I had to do a TLDR, I would say this is the chart of a liar.
Whoa. Yeah. I mean, his dad like had no real discernible skills, and he just like really couldn't do anything. But he just became the face of this company. So he just lied his way to the top, probably lied to his grandfather about his father to get him to leave him the company.
Wow.
Yeah, I feel like all that Virgo too is very like, substance abuse.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
Inheriting that sort of proclivity for certain addiction disorders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But enough about this family. Let's talk about what Armie is up to today. He was allegedly cut off from his family's finances, so he's real poor right now. And he seems to be working at a resort and selling timeshares because obviously he can't act anymore. He also is officially divorced from his wife.
Can you imagine if you got a solicited call from Armie Hammer to sell you a timeshare in the Grand Caymans?
Hell yeah.
I would.
I hope he has called me. I never pick up my phone.
Yeah, so same. If I ever get a Cayman call,
now maybe I will. Maybe I will. But the LA District Attorney's Office also recently announced that they won't be pursuing charges of sexual assault against him because they can't prove it was non-consensual, which is really a crock of shit. But
well, it sounds like it was consensual, but you can also use, like, if people are manipulated, then they feel violated after the fact, which happens a lot.
Exactly. It happens
just like there's no way to litigate it. And with the way dating culture is now, it's so in favor of men. Like they have these. I found out that dating apps are like 82% men.
No.
Yeah. Google it.
Interesting. I mean, it makes sense, but it's also like it just so shows how our society is like so anti-woman that like just because they might have initially been interested in him, it's like their fault that like he, tied them up with ropes and like branded them. Like, this is like real cult level shit. I don't know.
As a suggestible person, I'm glad it hasn't happened to me.
But, there's a lot of changes happening for Armie. Tana, what do you think?
Yeah,
to put it lightly.
Honestly, on my most favorite day, I just could not imagine this family. So I don't know, but I'll take a few shots. And so,
oh, wait, really quick. One thing I did really want to mention is that Armie's great-grandfather was besties with Prince Charles and was like almost William's godfather, allegedly. Apparently Diana was like, hell no. But
he was best friends with Prince Andrew. It'd be even more weirded out.
I don't know. They're all family friends. They're all in this weird circle. Like it just, that's how much that's how the ties like go for the Hammer family, like all the way up, not just through the presidency, but through the Kremlin. But all the way to the British royals, to the King of England.
So I guess,
So anyway, Dana, tell us what's going to happen with Armie this year. Hopefully this is there a pattern of this like ending this Hammer trauma? Because it's like everyone's inherited, but like he has a son. Like, is this like?
I haven't seen his son.
Sad to think about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, public shaming, although I feel like it can do, like no one else in his family has been publicly shamed, right? And once they did, they cut him off financially. So he became poor because his family had bad press. I do think that he could have a redemption arc, or he could just maybe not ever rise to the top again. But he has a nodal return, and his natal Venus is, of course, exactly conjunct his south node. So this is important for Venus. The nodal return is like life-changing plot twists. It's when the nodes are in the same signs as they were when you were born. So eclipses are happening in the same signs as they were when you were born. So it's like sort of like how the Saturn return brings up like your earliest fears. This also brings up some sort of like earliest patterns in your life. And the South Node on Venus in the 5th can be like getting dumped or reconnecting with past partners. This could be possibly healing for him, especially since Venus rules his 12th house, which is where the North Node just left. And that's also getting exiled. So the North Node in his 12th house was him being exiled and like having to be a travel agent. And he has Saturn in the 10th. And so Saturn is transiting Pisces right now, and his 10th house is Pisces. So this can be getting bad press or a redemption arc. It's exact on March 5th, 2024. So something important could happen to him that day. And Saturn will also be conjunct his Jupiter. So that can underscore this. Jupiter rules his 7th house of marriage. So maybe something with like he could reconnect with his wife. I don't know. Or maybe he would just sign like a major contract. The 7th house is contracts, and Jupiter rules his Pisces 10th house. So it could be like maybe he would get better work at that time that he felt like capable of committing to. And that could ultimately change his image. He also has Pluto at 5 degrees Scorpio. And this is important because Mercury stationed direct at 5 degrees Taurus in May. And Jupiter will station direct there in December. And there's a lunar eclipse there in October. So 5 degrees Taurus is a major degree for this year. And so since Taurus is his 5th house, this can be a lot of things happening behind the scenes. It could be healing for him, or it could be more secrets coming out. And he's also in his Saturn square. So Saturn transiting his 10th house of publicity, squaring his natal Saturn in the 7th house it's the first hurdle after your Saturn return. So this could be like, I don't know what he was doing at his Saturn return, which was 2015 to 2017. So maybe he'll get better work again if that's what he was doing. That was when Call Me By Your Name came out for sure. But Saturn also rules his 8th house of taboos, therapy, death, and his 9th house of God, spirituality. So maybe what if he joined a cult? Wouldn't that be interesting?
What if he joined Jared Leto's club?
Yeah.
I don't know why I just slurred my words. I know. Trailed off.
So, but yeah, I feel like Dana, going back to like what you said at the very beginning, is like about his progressed moon, which is conjunct his natal IC. And so it's like that was in his 4th house of family and hidden things, and conjunct his IC, which is the point of ending. So it's like he was the hidden enemy of his family. Like he took everyone down. Like he ended the Hammer family.
Well, yeah.
Whereas like he was like, not only did he expose himself, but he exposed his family.
Maybe that's where maybe that's the Gemini rising. Because his grandpa and great grandpa were Leo and Aquarius rising. So that's that axis of like being like, seeking power. And Gemini is sort of like a chatterbox, right? So he's like just yapping away on DMs.
Yeah.
It goes down.
His whole persona just brought down his whole goddamn family, which is crossy.
Which ironically would be maybe his chance for redemption. I don't know.
Like, oh, it's not my fault. It's my family's fault that I'm like this.
No, realizing that like like that like certain things aren't cool. Or
right. And so it's like, you don't mean redemption necessarily in the like public eye, but just like redemption of
his
self.
Sort of, coming to Jesus, I guess you would say.
I fucking hope so.
We'll see.
We'll see.
He doesn't seem very interesting, which is,
I mean, he's like a good-looking rich guy. Like,
yeah,
you don't need to like work hard when you have those two things,
But he seems like he really wants to seem interesting.
Yes, exactly. He does seem like such a tryhard.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm very curious to hear about him and his wife, but you'll have to sign up for our Patreon to do that. So you'll be able to get that extra chart comparing the Bibles of Armie and Courtney and Armie and his wife, and you won't want to miss it. So with that, I'm Elise.
I'm Dana.
And I'm Sarah.
And this is Allegedly Astrology.
Bye to everyone except Armie Hammer.
Drink your blood.